welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and editors and journalists and reporters, videographers and filmmakers, and anybody who's really putting something out in the borough of the Bronx. And this evening, we're in our second segment. We're going to talk about the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is a thorn in all of our sides. And in our first segment, we're also going to talk about transportation with the transit reporter for the city. And it is a pleasure to see Jose Martinez. Nice to have you with us, Jose.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for inviting me.
Just a little background so people know who you are. Maybe they'll remember you from New York One or from the Daily News. A little bit how you got to the city at this point. I know you've been there for a couple of years, but just a little background so people know who you are.
Well, the city.nyc is a nonprofit news organization that launched publishing officially about 2 years ago in April of 2019. And it's comprised of a lot of veteran and younger reporters who have been around the city for some time. In my case, I have been in newspapers, I've been in television. I spent about 17 years as a newspaper reporter, most of that time at the Daily News in the Bronx, where I first appeared on your show, going back 2 decades now, but we're not going to age ourselves, Gary.
I was going to say, please.
And then I spent some time at the New York Post, and then 6 years on air at New York One, where I covered transportation, which is what I cover now at the city.nyc. And I have to say, it's really one of the great beats in New York and anywhere.
Why do you feel that's like, why do you love this so much?
It hits everyone. It affects everyone. It is so important to the economy. It is so important to how people move around. And I think if you just look in the last year as to how much that has changed, you'll realize the subway is so central to the life in New York when you have the economy being what it was, the ridership disappearing as it did during so many months of the pandemic. It's a really different world when you don't have that central circulatory system that the subway and that the buses are. Affecting life in every way.
You know, you've just, I guess, unwittingly led right into what I want to talk about. One of the dialogues that's going on in the city right now that is expanding as we get toward a new mayor is the notion of greenways and bike lanes. And the city has done these road diets, and some have not been received very well by local communities. You did a story about a connected New York City greenway. Let's talk about what the possibilities are. Of course, the next mayor will shape whatever we whatever we discuss here, but lay out the groundwork, if you will, for what this is about and what the possibilities are.
Well, transportation has been altered fundamentally in some ways, as I just flicked that there in the opening, over the course of the last year during the pandemic. And one of the things that you've seen more of is people spending more time outside, people commuting on bicycles, people taking the new forms of transportation. So what I reported on recently on our website was about a push by groups from all over the city to finally link a 5-borough connection of what is known as greenways. So these are sort of park spaces. These are protected bike lanes that are physically protected from traffic, which is, obviously very important when you've had an increase in the number of fatalities of cyclists as we've had in the last few years here in the city of New York. So the hope among these advocates, and some of them are in the Bronx, on the Harlem River, on the Bronx River, is to connect some missing links, if you will, in a 400-mile network of greenways that are around the city, but there are holes in that network. And the hope is that with some federal funding, at least $1 billion, that some of these links can be connected to the point where you then have a network connecting Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, Bronx, Staten Island, all without any gap in that connection.
So you could, in essence, ride on your bicycle all over the city and really use it as another legitimate alternative for transportation. Having said all that, this is New York City and nothing goes down easy. As recent as this morning, I saw a good friend who posted significant annoyance of the bike lanes in Manhattan, because he said, I stepped off a curb. I almost got killed by a motorized bike. I saw an incident where somebody I know I was with stepped off the curb and a bicycle just, she didn't even notice, and the bike ran into her. And you people who ride cars, and not to say that that may be preferred or not preferred, but they're complaining because we lost parking spaces. Now with outdoor dining, which is of course here to stay, we lost parking spaces. How do we balance, what I'm getting at is, how do we balance the desire for an expanded greenway for the bike boom that's happening, as well as some of those other things that I mentioned?
Well, as you mentioned, anytime you want to put bike lanes in the city of New York, it's going to be a contentious issue. I would know. I live on the Upper West Side, and I've seen the fights over bike lanes on Central Park West, on Columbus, on Amsterdam. It's always a struggle. It's a back and forth between a lot of different interests. And now with the space being what it is, everyone wants a piece of it. So you've got outdoor restaurants, you've got some sidewalk space that has been slightly altered by the changes that we've seen. And you've got an increasing number of people on bicycles. You've also got other forms of transportation, such as mopeds, so those e-scooters, and it's a struggle for space. So it's really up to the city to find a way to make sure that it's a safe and reliable form for all involved. But it is a constant struggle, as you said, and as I mentioned earlier, we've had an increase in the number of fatalities of cyclists. So clearly something needs to be done there in terms of keeping cyclists safe. But it's a balancing act of shared space. And that's the trick, is finding the way to make it work, and to make it work safely for all involved.
And many people who are making decisions on who they're going to vote for mayor might want to consider what that plan looks like, because each mayor is going to have to deal with it, and according to their preference. So we will see. I want to move on to another story that you wrote a little while back, which I wasn't aware of. When I read it, I kind of couldn't believe it, that Governor Cuomo is looking to expand the rail access to and from LaGuardia. But the stop at Willets Point, which is where Citi Field is not going to have disabled access, and is not going to be an accessible
No,
stop.
it is. It is.
It seems a little odd to me. Let's put it that
Well,
way.
what you have at Willets Point is, of course, 7 Train and the Long Island Railroad. Those are MTA properties. And so some years back in 2014, the MTA actually committed to making the Met's Willets Point stop at the Long Island Railroad accessible to those with disabilities. So there was going to be an elevator going in, there was going to be a platform extension, there were going to be some changes that would allow for people who are of limited mobility to more easily get to ball games at Citi Field, to tennis matches at the National Tennis Center, or just to go over there to Flushing Meadows Park, because there's only so many stations in the subway and the railroad system that are fully accessible, and one that is as even if it's not a full-time station in terms of ball games and tennis matches, one that's heavily used is not
that one.
accessible.
Yeah, that's
So
got to be. I mean, you've got to do that.
It got caught up a little bit, if you will, in the planning that went for the air train. The air train, the connector between LaGuardia Airport and Willets Point, that will be fully accessible. It's being built by the Port Authority. But one of the things that, at least according to the MTA, gets caught in all that is the plans to make the LIRR stop at Met's Willets Point accessible. The promise was to have it ready by 2016. It's 2021. Who knows when it'll be done? Maybe by 2025. But that's a constant issue for the MTA, a real challenge to meet deadlines and to make more stations accessible.
You're a reporter, I'm a talk show host. I'm telling you, you can't put that stop in there and not have it be fully accessible. I'm sorry, it can't be done. You can't put the money in and then say, well, but you guys don't get to go to the game. Sorry, that doesn't happen.
It's tough. Yeah, you have to go to Woodside and then get on the 7 and then back ride, and only one of the platforms.
Yeah, we can't do that. Anyway, the last thing I want to ask you about is funding for the MTA. There was some notice in Albany when it was like the governor discovered $6 billion that would help their budget negotiations, and of course infrastructure funding as well as stimulus funding could be applied to the MTA. Is the MTA and riders less concerned now that there are enough funds to at least do some of the basic things we need to do for the MTA as we move forward now? Whereas, just 6 months ago or 9 months ago, it was like, oh my God, the thing is going to collapse.
Right. For months, all we heard about from the MTA was if we don't get federal funding, we're going to have to cut buses, we're going to have to cut subway service.
And
They
raise the
put
price.
that's always was part of the equation,
Of course.
and it could have been worse. They put the capital plan on hold. So what, and also raises for the employees, layoffs. It was an ugly, ugly mess for an agency that had been through a terrible last year when it lost more than 150 of its own employees to the pandemic. So it's been a bad year all around for the MTA. What the federal funding does is allows the MTA to go through whole for the next few years. In other words, no major service cuts, no big layoffs. Things are secure for now. That said, the ridership is still something of an issue because previously you were moving north of 5 million people a day on the subway. Right now, it's just at 2 million. The buses were carrying a significant number. It's gotten back a little better than the subway, but it still has to regain a lot. So that's a lot of revenue for the MTA that's lost, and they have to find some way to get back. The hope is that congestion pricing will bring some money into the system to allow for the capital projects to get moving again. But even though the federal money has helped the MTA and will get the MTA through the next year or two, the future beyond that is less certain.
I was waiting to get to a final word on that, a final assessment from you. And it sounds like the final assessment was hopeful. There's some money now, but we're going to have to keep feeding that piggy bank, so to speak, and make it grow because the needs are so immense, especially if you want to hold the line on the price. Anyway, that's all the time we have for our friend Jose Martinez. What a pleasure to reconnect with you, to have you back on BronxNet Television. Good luck with your continued work at the city, and guess what's going to happen? We're going to invite you back. It's going to happen.
It would be my pleasure. Thanks for having
Great.
me, Gary, and
Jose.
and thank you very much.
Great. It's again a pleasure to see you. Listen, we're going to keep talking transportation, but another thorny issue, and that is the Cross Bronx Expressway. There are some plans out there that you're going to be very interested in. Don't go away.